So when I think about a future that is solving climate, I think about raising our quality of life. I think about more inclusive cities with wonderful parks and, you know, fantastic mass transportation that's really
Mm,
considered a luxury good
mm-hmm,
because whether you're the wealthiest person in that city or the poorest, you all want to be on the same
mm-hmm,
subway or the same bus because it's simply the
mm-hmm.
best way to get around and everyone
Yeah.
enjoys these types of amenities. There are examples of that all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
We try and bring those to light, and that is my vision for what the future starts to look like.
Hello, everyone. This is Izumi Tanaka with the Home Green Homes podcast. I have a super cool guy today on my show named Josh Dorfman. He is a CEO and host of a company called Super Cool, and he's also a co-founder of Planted, carbon negative building materials. So we have a lot to talk about today, Josh. So thank you so much for being here with me today.
Well, Azumi, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to have a chance to talk with you.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, I always ask everybody, what is your background and what kind of, it's always curious to know what put us on this path of environmental issues, green building issues. What was the catalyst for you to be in this space?
Hmm. The catalyst for me goes back to my early 20s. So this would be in the mid 1990s. I graduated from college and was really thinking about a career in foreign service, diplomacy,
Mm,
and felt like I needed to get to China. It's just, for whatever reasons, it was clear to me that the 21st century was, in many respects, would be defined by this Chinese-American relationship. And so
mm,
I just knew I had to go. I ended up getting a job teaching English on a university in Nanjing, and which was fantastic. I got a part-time job working in a factory that made bicycle locks.
mm.
Now, at the
Interesting.
time, almost everyone in China had a bicycle, right? A
Uh-huh.
billion people riding
Yeah.
bikes. This was for an American company called Kryptonite that, like Kryptonite, stronger than
Yes, I'm
Superman, right?
familiar. Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, so this was the Kryptonite bike lock, and they were opening their first factory, and I just got this job. They needed an American to show up, let the Chinese know that we were watching, and I was there ostensibly to do quality control. I didn't even speak the language yet. I was trying to learn everything as fast as I could, and it was a wonderful experience. I loved it. Really threw myself into it. Became I would say pretty close to fluent in Chinese. We opened a third factory. I ended up going to work for Kryptonite full time, and we opened a third factory in southern China, just outside of Guangzhou in 1997. And I was traveling with the Chinese owner of the factory, and we were going to this restaurant. We were going to toast in like snake blood and what's called baijiu, their grain alcohol, and kind of consummate, right? This is a deal, and everyone toast together. Okay, and now we're doing business together. And we got to this parking lot and we were in the Chinese owner's Mercedes. This is still communist China, 1997, and we're in his Mercedes. And there's all these other Mercedes in the parking lot. I think this was a lot of Hong Kong businessmen who had factories
Mm-hmm.
in southern China. But he said to me before we went into the restaurant, he said, Josh, look, my Mercedes is the biggest Mercedes of all the cars in the parking lot. And his chest filled up, swelled up with pride. And I remember thinking in that moment, like, right, you're kind of like us. You want more, you want bigger, you want, right? You want
Mm-hmm.
the best possible kind of consumer lifestyle you can have. And then I thought, but wait a second, there's a billion people living here. I'm seeing the highways, I'm seeing the bridges, I'm seeing the tunnels, I'm seeing everything get built so fast. No one actually really wants a bike. I think everybody wants a car. I'm not an environmentalist. I don't really know what global warming is, but what's going to happen when there's a billion more people driving
Mm-hmm.
cars? And then you think about India developing and Eastern Europe developing and the rest of the world catching up and embracing this, more affluent consumer lifestyle. What would that mean for the planet? That was really this eye-opening a moment that just shook me never really left me and
Mm.
really steered a lot of the of my life and my career that followed from there.
So tell me what happens next. Like, I know that you were back in New York or something, making some furniture.
Well, to be honest, I'll tell you, like what happened next was I came back to the US, decided to
Mm-hmm.
get my MBA, and I didn't experience any culture shock going to China. I was excited, I was
Mm.
young, I was just into the embracing the culture. Coming home after that experience, the reverse culture shock hit me pretty hard because now I had this feeling of like, geez, like, are we, what are we doing to the planet?
Mm.
And I really went deep into those issues around climate change. And what I started to feel as I was kind of awakening to this was like, oh my gosh, we are not like we are in an emergency and we're not paying attention.
Yeah.
And now I'm back home and all the things that made sense to me before I left the country stopped making sense. And I remember I was in New York. I just remember walking down the street and looking up at all these office towers at 9 o'clock at night. And I said out loud, like, why are all the lights on? I went through a phase of, I would say, kind of like more activist type phase, like in
Mm.
going to trying to figure out, get my thoughts together, trying to figure out like,
Mm.
geez, we have this problem, we're not paying attention. I'm gonna go march here. I'm gonna, raise my hand here. And ultimately, by 2004, I started to feel no, no, I'd gone through the dot-com thing and worked for some companies, but by 2004, for myself, I started to feel like, okay, look, here's where my head's at. I grew up in a consumer culture. I like stuff. I am kind of operating from a mindset of when I show up in a room or I go visit my family, all that really happens is that no one wants to hang out with me because I just make everyone feel miserable, but I'm not really changing anybody. I'm not changing
Mm.
anything. I'm just like this miserable person that is like alienating all their like friends and loved ones because I'm so like, anxious about the climate. And so I shifted and I decided, you know what? I can't fix everything at once, but I can play a role, I believe, in helping to shift our consumption in a more sustainable direction. I feel like that needs to happen. We live in a consumer-driven economy. And so I did start my first company in 2004. It was called VivaVie, like Viva V, Live Life.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to assemble a collection, what eventually became a modern design, eco-friendly furniture company of really, really beautiful design, all made from environmentally responsible materials.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so the furnitures that you were creating, you say environmentally conscious or sustainable. And how so were they? Like furniture, I'm assuming that you were making with some wood material. So you were using FSC Forest Stewardship certified wood, or what? How did you define the sustainable furniture or eco-friendly furniture?
At that point in 2004, the company I built was more, we had an e-commerce component. We had ended up
Mm-hmm.
having two showrooms in New York City, but we were really more of a showroom model, more of a retail model.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
the standard that we put in place when we would say, is this something we're going to carry? Is this a designer we want, a company we want
I
to
see.
represent? Was, you know, in my mind was and is at least 50% of these materials in this line sustainable. And so that could be
Mm-hmm.
FSC certified wood.
Mm-hmm.
That could be reclaimed wood or
I see.
reclaimed something else,
Right.
recycled plastic, right? It was
Right.
a whole suite of different approaches because we probably ended up by our peak, we probably had 80 different furniture lines that we were carrying.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a very exciting moment because it wasn't just that there was these options, more and more options around environmental sustainability for furniture. It was that the design was suddenly becoming so much better all over the
Mm.
country and really around the world,
Mm-hmm.
where I felt like by 2004, let's see, so I was in my early 30s, and there were all of these designers that I was meeting who were late 20s, early 30s, had apprenticed, gone to good design schools, and had sort of said for themselves, the same thing. Like, I've had enough. Like, I'm
Mm.
tired of just designing something that I don't want in my own house because I know it doesn't fit my values. And I don't want to just tie some string around some twigs and call it a bench, right? I actually want something that has a design sensibility to it. And
Hmm.
right now, today, that sounds very normal. Like, yeah, okay, there's sustainable products,
Yeah.
but 20 years ago, that just wasn't the case. I mean, it was all
Hmm.
so new.
Hmm. And so, how did that transition into planted came first or super cool came first? I think planted came next, right? And
Planted came next.
and there was something you told me when we first spoke with each other about something about lazy environmentalist.
Oh, yes,
You have to
yes.
tell me that about that part.
So with this company, VivaVie, I started the company in Washington, D.C. And
Hmm.
because I had gone into a PhD program in political science at George Washington University.
Wow.
And I was going to study politics. And yeah, it sounds impressive, but I basically like washed out after about a semester. But I was going to study politics and environment and China. And I thought, you know what, I'll go get this PhD and maybe I'll be like, I don't know if you know like who Jack Ryan is from like the Patriot Games. Like I'll be
Yeah.
like the Jack Ryan of the environment. I'll have this PhD, whatever. And I was in that for like a semester. I was like, oh my God, I made such a big mistake. Um, and that's when I decided to start VivaVie. But
Mm.
so I started this company in Washington, D.C., and I had one employee. We're really bootstrapping this thing and working out of my apartment. I decided I needed to move up to Brooklyn at
Hmm.
the end of 2004 because a lot of the designers that I was being introduced to who were doing this really cool
Hmm.
furniture sustainable design. We're in Brooklyn. So Lucy, on her last day working for me, we had made a deal that if she would pack up the office, she was the office manager, and drive with me up to Brooklyn to this new apartment I was going to that I hadn't been to before. I was subletting a room. I would give her the van as a parting gift. I wouldn't need it anymore. I was going to be in Brooklyn
Hmm.
and say goodbye. So she agreed. We're on the New Jersey Turnpike. It's about 10:30 at night. It's been a long day. And I don't know what's wrong, but suddenly she seems to be like hyperventilating in the passenger seat. Her breath is coming in gulps and ooh, ooh. And I'm like, Lucy, are you okay? And she finally says, Josh, like I have to ask you something. I have to get this off my chest. I couldn't ask you when you were my boss,
Uh-huh.
but you're not my boss anymore. And there's something I really need to know. And so I instantly thought, oh my God, she's attracted to me. This is what's going to happen. I'm not her boss anymore. It's true. But why, I started getting nervous. And so I said, look, it's okay. You can tell me anything. We can talk about anything. She said, okay, look, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but are you really an environmentalist? It's like, you're always in the shower. You barely recycle. You were going to throw your bed out. I took it to the homeless shelter. You don't act like an environmentalist. You don't talk like an environmentalist. You're just a giant hypocrite. And what is your deal?
Oh
So,
my God.
yeah, so she was furious at me and she'd been holding it in for like a year and a half that we were working
Oh
together.
my God.
Right. So the night, it definitely didn't go the way I thought it might. It was she ended up leaving with the van and taking off. But what she said was true, and I had to own it. And so the next day I wrote this blog entry on our little furniture company and I called it the lazy environmentalist. And I said, look, I am owning this behavior that I'm not proud of, but I do take long showers. I do my best thinking in the shower. I know I'm using energy and water. I'd love a phenomenal low flow shower head that cuts my carbon footprint, right?
Sure.
And I will buy it. And I want an Audi TT convertible. I don't care if it's electric or hydrogen. If I can afford it and it's sustainable, I'll get it. But I'm not going to go out of my way to. I'm not proud of
Mm.
it. I'm
Hmm.
not saying like this is good. It's actually probably bad. But this is just honestly who I am. I
Right.
care. I'm
Hmm.
lazy. I'm a lazy environmentalist. And I think there's probably millions of people in America who feel the way I do. We will do this if
Hmm.
you make it easy and convenient and cost effective, whatever else. A radio producer read that blog, which shocked me, but at the time there just weren't a lot of blogs 20 years ago. And he
Hmm.
called me up and he said, "This is really interesting. Let's turn this into a radio show." I was like,
Oh
"That's
wow.
that sounds great. I have no marketing budget. Let's do a radio show. That sounds
Yeah.
great." And he said, "Well, you're going to pay for it." So I was like, "All right, well, maybe I can scrape together some money." we did this little internet radio show called The Lazy Environmentalist, and I started calling up all these people who I knew who were doing these cool things around the environment. Someone I
Uh-huh.
was selling their product, others I knew, and we started putting the show together. 6 months later, I was in New York. I got a break. It went to Sirius Satellite Radio, which became Sirius XM. So then I had this little show on Sirius XM, and then it
Oh,
went live on
wow.
Sirius XM. And then I went on the Martha Stewart show for her as her Earth Day guest in 2007.
Wow.
And then it became a reality TV show on Sundance Channel that I had for 2 years. This little thing where Lucy was just, yelling at me for being a terrible
Mm-hmm.
environmentalist turned
Mm-hmm.
into, this whole media thing.
You totally owe it to Lucy, don't you?
I do. It was fascinating. It was all new. I had never done anything like that before. I'd never been on TV before. And it was just it was a fantastic experience.
So that led to super cool.
Well, eventually, but in
Okay.
between, so and just to bring this fat forward, so
Mm-hmm.
um, we did Lazy Environmentalists for about 5 years, and
Mm-hmm.
then it came to an end, and I went back to do startups because that's what I like to
Okay.
do.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, I hit on this idea of planted,
Mm-hmm.
and this was during the pandemic. This was about I had started another furniture company called Simply, like Simple Assembly, and it was kind of
Mm-hmm.
like flat pack, knockdown
I
furniture,
see.
kind of IKEA style, all eco-friendly, and I liked it. It was a good little brand. We were
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing in North Carolina, and when
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic hit, everything got shut down. The
Right.
factory, the
Mm-hmm.
materials, we were using an FSC certified wood, a very high
Mm-hmm.
quality plywood. And when I could get it, the quality was going down, the price was going up. And I just started thinking about materials and saying, is really the best we can do just cutting down trees? Is there
Mm-hmm.
something else we can do at scale? And in that moment, I was introduced to a guy who was also manufacturing with a small little company in North Carolina. Someone connected us. We get on the phone, and I started complaining about materials. And
Mm-hmm.
he said, "Well, what would you use?" And I said, "I don't really know, but maybe I would explore making something out of hemp." And he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, that's so interesting. I have 6 giant trash bags of hemp in my garage." And so then I was like, "Who are you? What? Who are you? Who says that?" And he says, "Well, I just spent 8 years. I just left. I spent 8 years leading the life support systems team at SpaceX, keeping astronauts alive on the Dragon crew spacecraft." And I was
Wow.
like, "And you have 6 bags of hemp, and you go what? And you moved to North Carolina?" And I'm pulling this all together, and WADA was very interested in carbon removal, in thinking
Mm.
about, and Elon Musk was talking about carbon removal, but and also making the case that there's not enough land to
Mm.
plant enough trees to really make a dent in
Right.
carbon removal and climate change. So you need something that grows faster than trees and can suck down carbon faster.
Mm-hmm.
So we quickly just latched onto this idea of saying, what if we could find something that could grow much faster than trees,
Mm.
had utility in it, meaning if we grew it, maybe it could replace lumber, right? So we didn't
Mm.
have to cut down trees for lumber. Maybe we could use this instead.
Right.
And where does the lumber go? Well, the lumber goes into homes. If we had a SpaceX team and we were going to build a factory, and so we were going to do some sort of engineered wood, like a
Mm.
plywood or
Mm-hmm.
like an oriented strand board, which
Mm-hmm.
replaces plywood in homes, that's like the board
Mm-hmm.
you nail to the 2x4s,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right. Could we do that? Could we figure that out? Maybe it's hemp, maybe it's something else. And so that actually became planted. That's what we do. And so when we say carbon negative building materials, we identified a perennial grass that
Mm-hmm.
is similar to bamboo. It's not
Mm.
bamboo, but bamboo is known to grow exceptionally
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
This grass that we grow grows exceptionally fast. It's extremely hardy, extremely strong. We grow it, harvest it, slice it very thin, and then with our SpaceX team built the first of its kind factory or production technology that has no smokestack on the roof. It's entirely electric. And so
Wow.
we pull the carbon down through the grass and we sequester it in these panels that we make. We don't give it back
Right.
through a
Right.
smokestack. So we're able to sequester that in the walls of new homes. And that's what Planted is doing today.
Oh, wow. And so, what is the grass? What's the name of the plant?
Well, the
Can you tell
specific
me?
grass is
Uh-huh.
proprietary to
Okay.
us.
I see.
Um, but we just did an ex wasn't an exhaustive search. We did a very extensive search. We tested
Mm-hmm.
all sorts of biomass. We went
Wow.
extensively with hemp. We looked at some waste products like like a corn stalk called a corn
Mm-hmm.
stover. We
Mm-hmm.
looked at sugar cane. We looked
Right.
at across the board to identify what would meet our
Mm-hmm.
criteria,
Mm-hmm.
speed of growth, limited resources also that need to go into planting
Right.
of it, right? As
Right.
a perennial grass, there's far less that needs to go into it than an annual crop where you constantly have to till the soil and plant something
Right.
new
Right.
over
Right.
and over
Yeah.
and over again.
Yeah.
Um, and that had dimensions where we could mechanically harvest it. You can't mechanically harvest bamboo, it's too thick, grows too
Mm-hmm.
big, right? So
I see.
there's all these things that we had to figure out what would be
Wow.
close to as ideal as possible. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
eventually we landed on this
Mm-hmm.
grass that we found. But the
I
thing was
see.
once we found the grass, there we're like, okay, this is it. This is the grass we're going to use. And we
Mm-hmm.
found it through the North Carolina Department of Agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
They'd been growing different grasses as potential alternatives for biofuels. Um,
Right.
so they wanted things that could grow really fast. But once we figured out what we wanted to use, the challenge was there was no one to call to order it. There was no one grew it. So we couldn't place
Mm-hmm.
an order, call someone and be like, hey, we'll take 5,000 tons of this grass, please. We
Yeah.
had to go set up a tissue culture lab, set out the greenhouse operations,
Oh my
vertically
God.
integrate, and build an entirely new agriculture supply chain,
Wow.
which isn't really done very often. And
Mm-hmm. I would
so we're
imagine.
innovating on the agriculture side and then innovating on the technology engineering production side
Mm.
to make this entire thing possible.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about the product itself, like the material itself. So it's basically SIPs, like the panels,
Well,
insulated panels.
it's not quite
It's
a
different.
sip. It
Uh-huh.
would be like, it would be a component of a sip because it's the panel that
I
you would
see.
sandwich some insulation between,
I
right? So
see.
it's really much more like plywood, but most
Uh-huh.
plywood in homes is material called oriented strand board, which is really like a
Mm-hmm.
chipped board, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
you
Right, right,
take
right.
you take a tree, chip it,
Right.
press like
OSB.
three
Uh-huh.
layer, yeah, OSB. It replaces OSB. And
I
so
see.
what we designed was something that feels a lot like OSB intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
So for a
Mm-hmm.
home builder
Mm-hmm.
using this on a job site to nail this to the 2x4s, either for the wall or the roof,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
we'll get to subfloor. Our goal was to not have them be able to tell the difference. Right? It installs
Mm.
exactly the same. It drop in
I see.
replaces what they
I
use
see.
today. So
Mm-hmm.
the drilling into it has to be the same. The density
Mm-hmm.
has to be very similar.
Mm-hmm.
The weight has
Mm-hmm.
to be very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what we felt was crucial for getting builders to
Mm-hmm.
adopt this material. So
Right.
if you see it on a home, other than the fact that it has our logo on it,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't necessarily
I
know
see. I see.
that it was something else.
Mm-hmm.
Now it is more moisture resistant. It is a higher quality product,
Mm-hmm.
but it you wouldn't really know unless you were asking or you were
Right.
looking for planting. And that's really the goal for us to get mass adoption in the marketplace. It's a
Mm-hmm.
sustainable product, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not really trying to sell sustainability. We're trying to sell
Mm-hmm.
something that's really easy to use,
Mm-hmm.
better on moisture,
Mm-hmm.
and easy to adopt.
Mm-hmm. How do you market or distribute this product?
Well, some might say that we were very strategic. Others
Mm-hmm.
might say that we were very lucky. What happened early on for us as
Mm-hmm.
we were developing the whole process, the whole
Mm-hmm.
technology,
Mm-hmm.
we started developing a relationship with DR Horton, who's the
Mm-hmm.
largest
Oh
home
yes.
builder in America.
Uh-huh.
And
Right.
so very early in our process in 2000, when was it? 22. We had just raised our seed round. We'd raised $2 million and we were
Mm.
still in a tiny little prototype shop. And their executives came to visit. And we had built machines, these little machines, right? We were
Mm-hmm.
making panels that were maybe the size of a notebook.
Mm-hmm.
And but we had a press so we could like slice this grass
Mm-hmm.
and what was so interesting was these guys from SpaceX, the way that they design technology is to you would think, okay, you're building a rocket ship, you're going to build the most advanced thing, but really what that starts with is the most basic thing. And the way that Wada made a mixer, right? You need to
Right.
slice the hemp or slice the grass or whatever, put a little bit of resin on it and mix it. Was he went out and he had bought a used 50-gallon black pickle barrel. And then he bought a used treadmill off of Craigslist for like $150. And he figured out how to bolt the pickle barrel to the treadmill, put some wheels on it,
Oh
and then
my
run the
God.
treadmill, which right spins the pickle barrel.
Oh
You just
my
throw the little stuff,
God. Uh,
and it's
how
like that
creative is that?
that's the mindset and the
Hmm.
ingenuity that our team takes to design what eventually has now
Mm-hmm.
become like a full-scale production
Mm-hmm.
facility.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all of that's like how do we remove costs? How do we
Mm-hmm.
design a system
Mm-hmm.
that does the job but
Right.
nothing more, right? Because
Right.
we're going to have to control costs, as a startup trying to compete
Mm-hmm.
in a against very big competitors.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of that thinking and having a D.R. Horton and some other potential
Mm-hmm.
partners
Mm-hmm.
see the design thinking,
I
see the
see.
process,
I
created a
see.
lot of confidence. And
Right.
so by the end of 2024, D.R. Horton gave us an order for 10 million panels.
Wow.
That's a lot of panels. And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to keep us busy for quite
Yeah.
some time. But
Sure.
it came from years together seeing how we were developing and putting the
Right.
foundation in place for this company.
Right. Yeah. So what are the benefit of this planted building
Mm,
material that, obviously you talked about sequestering the carbon as you grow the grass,
yeah.
as it's applied to the home exterior walls or in the structure, in the building construction. What are the benefits that you can speak of?
The main differentiator that we've leaned into is around moisture.
Mm,
If OSB, like we're talking
mm-hmm.
about, gets wet when it's in a wall, and so this is the interior, right? This is the
Right.
interior material, right? And then
Right.
the sheetrock goes over the this material that's behind the
Mm-hmm.
sheetrock because this is the structural material.
Mm-hmm.
If OSB as a structural material, it's keeping your house up, starts to get wet, well then it can become somewhat compromised, right? You
Right.
want to keep
Right.
moisture out.
Yeah.
Our material is does much better with moisture. And
Mm,
so
I see.
that's a big deal for
Mm-hmm.
builders.
Mm-hmm.
We're still evaluating other things where we think there's advantage, but we have to, certify test results before we make any
Mm, I
claims.
see. I
But
see.
we're exploring things around fire and fire
Mm,
resistance or
mm-hmm.
fire retardation.
Mm-hmm.
Some things still to be determined,
I see.
but it's a very interesting material that
Uh-huh.
competes on its merits so that we're not just selling sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the reason why someone necessarily is going to want to buy this product.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, should help them build a better home.
Could it be applied in like panelized system or modular system? If the builders are using that type of system, can they be used for that type of application?
Certainly, and we've explored those
Mm-hmm.
conversations as
I
well.
see. I see.
And that's very exciting to us. As modular building and offsite construction continues to grow,
Mm-hmm.
over time, hopefully that becomes a very strong
Yeah.
channel. There's a lot of alignment, kind of mission alignment, because a lot of the builders who are doing modular or offsite
Mm-hmm.
construction do have a strong sustainability ethos as
Mm-hmm.
well.
Mm-hmm.
So, that would be a really nice fit.
Yeah, yeah. So now let's talk about super cool. Like, what is super cool? I think it's really super cool, but it's a media company, correct?
Yeah, thank you, Azumi. So when I left Planted, I stepped down last year as
Mm.
CEO,
Mm-hmm.
and through Planted, my career started to shift more toward I guess you would say a business to business lens.
Mm-hmm.
We're making materials,
I
we're
see.
selling them to other home builders
I
as
see.
opposed to furniture I'm selling directly to a
Mm-hmm.
consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking around and saying, okay, well, what am I going to do next? What's happening in this realm of climate innovation, which is
Mm-hmm.
where I've been most passionate, it's informed a lot of my career.
Right.
And what I started to see was that there was so much innovation happening, whether it was in buildings and homes or in transportation or circular economy, clean
Mm-hmm.
energy, you name it. There's all this innovation starting to happen that was underway, but I felt underreported.
Mm-hmm.
And then I looked at the numbers and I started to see, wow, okay, in 2024, $2 trillion was invested globally in clean energy. That's $1 trillion more than was invested in fossil fuels.
Mm-hmm.
This shift is
Mm-hmm.
completely underway. And
Mm-hmm.
then I started to look at what cities were doing all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of cities have climate action plans.
Yeah.
And it's not just like a New York or a Tokyo who are definitely doing really interesting stuff,
Mm-hmm.
but you start to come across like I started listening to this podcast called City Climate Corner, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like really nerdy about policy, and it's these two nerdy policy people and climate people in Minnesota, and they speak to smaller cities around the US, and they
Uh-huh.
talk to like people in like Lincoln, Nebraska, who had figured out in the government how to incentivize owners of low income housing to improve and renovate their low income housing units. And no
Mm-hmm.
one's usually very incentivized to do that, right?
Yeah.
But they said, look, we're going to give you this grant for, a certain amount of money for every unit in your
Mm-hmm.
building.
Mm-hmm.
And we want you in conjunction with the tenant to decide what the upgrades could be. And so that could be better insulation for more energy efficiency
Mm-hmm.
and more comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And then what they said was, you don't have to pay us back. Like it's just go upgrade the
Yes.
quality of life, right? And the
Mm-hmm.
efficiency for all these people.
Mm-hmm.
And the way we as a city we're gonna get paid back is by virtue of doing this, the value of your building is going to go up, which means the value of the surrounding buildings are going to go up.
Yeah.
So the tax base is actually going to increase. We're going to get paid back because of this virtuous
Oh.
cycle. And I'm sitting there listening to this and I'm thinking, wait, you're doing this in Lincoln, Nebraska? Not to say anything bad about Lincoln, Nebraska, but Lincoln, Nebraska is middle America, and I
Yeah.
just thought if you can affect change like this in Lincoln, Nebraska, you could affect change like this everywhere. People need to
Anywhere.
know that this
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
happening in
Yeah.
Lincoln
Yeah.
so they can replicate it. And I just started feeling like there's an opportunity with a media company to share these kinds of stories around solutions that are proven. They are de-risked. You could take them to your boss. You're not going to
Yeah.
get fired.
Yeah.
And they work for businesses. They work for governments.
Yeah.
They improve people's lives, and they're here today. Super cool.
Mm.
Tells those kinds of stories.
Mm-hmm. Now, so on your personal level, though, as a super cool person, what are the things that you are telling people, the stories that you're telling around, professionally, personally, as somebody who deeply cares about what's happening in the climate and environment, in this current political climate, obviously, we have a lot of challenges. So what are your messages personally?
Well, what I still see week after week are solutions that check these boxes for us. And the boxes for us, again, are that they are commercialized. They're
Mm-hmm.
beyond the pilot stage. They're out of the lab. They're
Mm-hmm.
actually scaling up market.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they deliver value to their customers and they make life better in the process. And so
Mm-hmm.
what I see is like, you know, a company like AeroSeal, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so this is for the home. And I just found this very interesting. The whole story is so interesting, but essentially 30 years ago, there was a professor in California who invented a way to take leaky ducts, right, in homes, which
Mm-hmm.
HVAC, our heating and our air conditioning uses more energy in a home than
Mm-hmm.
anything else that we
Mm-hmm.
do. It's
Yeah.
for many, it's almost 50%
Yeah.
of the energy load, right?
Yeah.
In older homes, especially, but it can even happen in new homes, like half of that energy is wasted through leaks. It's crazy. And then if you think about leaks in like the building envelope. And
Mm-hmm.
so this technology was developed to create a particle cloud that could go into an air duct in a home, find the leaks and seal them up with this like,
Mm,
particle cloud
right.
that adheres to it, right? 30 years ago it gets invented. but it was just so far ahead of its time, or maybe it wasn't the right champion. It
Yeah.
didn't go anywhere. Carrier, the big HVAC company, bought it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they sat on it for another decade. And then this entrepreneur, Amit Gupta, or no, I shouldn't say, sorry, not entrepreneur, product manager in Carrier, not an entrepreneur. It gets handed to him and becomes part of his portfolio. And he looks at this thing. He's like, oh my God, this is going to change the world. I've got relatives in England and who are living in some of the leakiest buildings in the developed world. My God, what this could do. And so he negotiates the rights with Carrier to get the technology and take it out of Carrier and start a new company called Aerosil or
Mm-hmm.
restart Aerosil.
Mm-hmm.
First time entrepreneur. It takes
Mm-hmm.
him about a decade, but then he gets backing from Bill Gates and Breakthrough Energy Ventures, and suddenly the world 30 years later has caught up and said, "Oh yeah, this is actually a really good idea. We should go fix all the leaks in our homes and in our giant buildings and like the Wynn Hotel and new
Yeah.
buildings in Dubai." Right? So that's a solution that works because if you can clog those leaks, you're saving everybody a lot of money. You're getting
Right.
much more comfortable in your indoor
Mm.
spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a technology that is easy to deploy. And
Mm-hmm.
so I see solutions like that again and again and again. It's
Mm-hmm.
like energy efficiency has suddenly become sexy in a way that right? Because energy efficiency used to be like taking your medicine, you got to talk
Yeah.
about it, nobody wants to do it. But we're really living in a different moment. And so
Yeah.
I find that very exciting.
I see. Now, so are those stories on a platform, super cool platform, and where can we find those stories?
So Super Cool is a weekly podcast,
Okay.
and we do dig into those types of stories. We interview those types
Mm-hmm.
of leaders and
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
executives. We have a weekly newsletter. We have a growing YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
The all of it can be found at getsuper.cool. That's our website. But we're on every channel, and so if that is interesting to your listeners, they can find us wherever they are. You're probably listening to this show.
Yes.
But we like super cool, and
I
that's
like
what we're
it
trying to
too.
do is
Yeah.
build a super cool future. So
Yeah.
that's really the intent.
Well, so my last question for you, Josh, is what is your super cool future look like to you?
Well, the idea I would say around for me around sustainability and or thinking about the climate future, I have always felt when people have asked me like, what's your definition of sustainability? My view is to live as well as you possibly can while enabling future generations to do the same. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I look at and not all climate solutions are created equal. Some
Mm-hmm.
aren't that great. Some
Right.
aren't that effective in cutting carbon. Some
Right.
actually don't make our lives that much better. Some
Right.
are inconvenient, right? But the best of them do point us toward a future that is better than today. I would say on every measure. And whether that's hospitals where you recover
Mm-hmm.
better and
Mm-hmm.
faster, or schools where students' performance goes up by virtue of
Mm-hmm.
being in a green school, and
Mm-hmm.
faculty actually wants to stay and not
Mm-hmm.
leave the profession,
Right.
all of those things are tied to the green solution.
Mm-hmm.
And that's increasingly understood. So when I think about a future, that is solving climate, I think about raising our quality of life. I think about more inclusive cities with wonderful parks and, you know, fantastic mass transportation that's really
Mm-hmm.
considered a luxury good
Mm-hmm.
because whether you're the wealthiest person in that city or the poorest, you all want to be on the same
Mm-hmm.
subway or the same bus because it's simply
Mm-hmm.
the best way to get around and everyone
Yeah.
enjoys these types of amenities. There are
Right.
examples of that all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
We try and bring those to light, and that is my vision for what the future starts to look like.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Josh. So we can find you at getsuper.cool website.
You find all of the super cool media that we're doing. I tend to be mostly on social on LinkedIn, and
Okay.
so listeners who want to connect with me or follow what we're doing, that's the best platform to check
Okay.
in with us.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Josh. so fascinating. Your journey from being in China all the way to where you are. It's such a great journey to fascinating story. I love hearing that. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for giving me an opportunity to chat with you and talk about it. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was Izumi Tanaka with Home Green Homes Podcast. Until my next show.